This presentation will be different from the previous ones, as I will not be talking so much about I will not be talking about PEROSH history and things like that at all, but I will relate my talk to PEROSH. What I will hope to is to inspire you to work on how to get more insight into how you can create societal impact of your research as a researcher and as research institutions. And Frank Pott, I think he almost ruined my presentation, because I wanted to say that, well, if we just look 150 years back or 100 years back, we can see that conditions were much worse in our societies. Hard work, repetitive work, chemical hazards, and so on and so forth. So something happened since then, I think. And I was reassured when Stefan Olsen said, yeah, okay, Frank Pott, you said some of that is still here, but Stefan Olsen said, yeah, we also made a lot of progress. But how much of that can then be attributed to our work as scientists and research institutions? Because a lot of that is to do with societal developments in general, and some of it has even to do with exporting bad working conditions to other countries with more lax regulation, such as shipwrecking in India and Bangladesh and textile production. But so if we want to convince our stakeholders that we actually have an impact, and also convince ourselves that we are making a difference, we should know what are the roles of the institutions, such as the PEROSH institutions. We are all applied institutions, and one of our basic roles is to observe and describe, or with Pink Floyd's words, just the basic facts. Can you show me where it hurts? So we can use epidemiological research, cohort studies, mechanism studies, and so on to prove that work has detrimental or maybe also positive effects on humans. But if we continue with Pink Floyd's words, a distant ship, smoke in the horizon, do we actually find out, do people actually discover what we do when we make all this beautiful evidence of the effects of work? We need then also to be engaged. One of our roles is to exchange and translate what we do. And this is a picture of one of our researchers with our Minister of Employment, exchanging and explaining some of the chemical research for her. And also we do action research, intervention research, and so on and so forth. And then there is, I would say there's a third role, and that's injecting evidence-based knowledge with Pink Floyd's works. Just a little pinprick, there'll be no more, and then screams. But well, hope it was that easy. It is not as easy, and also I would say that this is injection is the most controversial part of our roles, because there's the arm's length principle that we talked about in the previous presentation, that we should provide the data and the facts, but should we also engage? And if we look back, we have already seen that the medical doctors in the previous centuries, they, if you saw the first pictures, there was a lot of children on that one, and some of the first factory laws in Denmark was actually medical doctors showing that this had a very detrimental effects on children, so they worked with the politician, trying to make them regulate the working environment. And still, I think it's a legitimate role that we have, trying to inject the scientific knowledge that we have, or at least maybe not injecting, but at least trying to influence. But it is a balance. I was recently interviewing, we want to know more about the policy processes, so I was interviewing a guy from the Labor Inspectorate, and when I said that the purpose of this research was to know more about how we influence policy, he said, well, stop. You are not influencing policy, we are influencing policy, and the policymakers are making the policy. You are doing the research. So it is a controversial subject, but still I think it's a valid work and role for us to try to disseminate and get our knowledge implemented in policy and praxis. So I will continue talking now about how to do that. And first, this societal impact that I talk about essentially is everything else than just affecting other scientific articles and get some citations. It is research contributions to addressing current and future social and environmental, economic, and other needs outside of academia. And I would say all PEROSH institutions do that, and also the PEROSH rights themselves ensure the quality of work and employment in Europe. That's clearly within the scope of this definition. And if we look at the NFA, we have a legal mandate to conduct research at highest international level, advise decision makers. We should also perform tasks for occupational health and safety authorities, and we should conduct development work with clear societal purpose and transfer knowledge and technology to relevant stakeholders. So it's clearly within our mandate that we should try to get our knowledge out to practice. But we are part of a very complex ecosystem. This is a recent report by the RAND Corporation called The Role of Evidence in Occupational Health and Safety, and we are the yellow part up in the upper left corner, and where we have the government institutions in the other corner, and we have the workplaces that we are trying to influence at the bottom, where we have the decisions made at work. And in between that, we have a lot of different, you could call them knowledge brokers or translators that take our research and translate it into practice, including the labor inspectors. And as you can see, there's a lot of impact pathways between how we get the funding, how we influence the politicians, how we get knowledge to the workplaces. And can we then work with that more systematically? And we say, yes, we can do that. And there's several models for doing that. If we look at a recent article by David Butz, a professor in Denmark, he and his colleagues, they made a review of different models for trying to map these kinds of impact pathways. Some prominent examples are the payback framework, which is simply, it's actually a phase model with some feedback loops. There's the Ciampi network, Ciampi model, which talks about productive interactions, how you interact with stakeholders, impact EV on the EU level, the REF, the Research Excellence Framework, which is used in the United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of inspiration you can get in an article about that. And one of the things that is uniting a lot of these models is that they build on a basic bottom model that you can see in the bottom here, a phase model saying we have some activities, then something happens, and then you get some impact. But the whole idea then in this framework is that you can order that in a way that you can try to follow the contributions from research to outcomes. Sounds easy, right? You can order things, but then, of course, when you look detailed into it, it's much more complex. You have feedback loops, things that are affecting other things over time, and then giving feedback the other way. At the NFA, I will try to show how we work with this. We've been inspired by the Institute of Work and Health. They have made a model on the left side of this slide. And our model here shows how we try to envision at the institute level how we produce societal impact. We get some funding on the left side. We then do some research projects. We develop capacity doing that. We have some products such as reports, fact sheets, things like that. And also we have productive interactions, meaning we have webinars and meetings with stakeholders. Then we hope that we get to some immediate outcomes on policy level, on changes at professional level, which then will translate later on into workplace changes, workplace behavior, which then hopefully will lead to better work and health for safety for at workplaces. And that's the direct pathways. And then on the top, we'll have a constant interaction between best international level, and that's where the collaboration with PEROSH comes in, that we constantly try to engage with other institutions and verify our results and get inspiration. And then at the bottom level, we also, throughout all the phases of research, are in interaction with our stakeholders, the knowledge brokers, and so on. So this is a way that we try to depict how we think about how we will work with societal impact. And then I've been engaging, for example, with a chemical group, and this is in Danish, but this is an even more elaborate model where we mapped all the stakeholders within a specific chemical area, trying to figure out how do we get from the red point where we do the research to the green point where we get the impact. And one of the findings for the chemical groups here was, for example, the importance of the international institutions they had, which are in the bottom here. But also we discovered that municipalities, we had a very weak link to municipalities, even though a lot of these exposures were happening in municipalities. So the effect of doing this mapping was that they started to invite people from Municipality Denmark into some of our some of the meetings with the stakeholders. Now I will use another model. So as inspiration for you, this is from an article by Sarah Morton and colleagues. I think this is a nice way of showing why it is so difficult to figure out why or whether we had impact. Because if we are on the left side where we have the activities, then they translate into actions that we've talked about before, and then to new behavior, and then into more changes at the societal level. But in the beginning, if you look at the top on the red area, we have a lot of influence of what we do. But the further away from from our research we get less and less influence of how our research is used or misused. And on the bottom level, we also, in the green area, there's more and more other influences coming in. Technological changes, organizational changes, other scientific fields showing something else than we showed, and so on and so forth. So it's more and more dubious the further you get to the right of this, or to the right, that's that way, for you. It's more and more difficult to actually show our specific contributions. What we can do there is to try to make impact cases. And that's what's done in the Research Excellence Framework in the United Kingdom. So we can try to prove that we did this research, it had these results. Asbestos was mentioned before. We could see that asbestos was used at a certain time period. Now we can follow health and safety for people, and then we can see that they have increased risk of cancer. So we can do that for particular research results in particular areas. But if we wanted to show that for the whole department, it would be, or the whole PEROSH for that example, it would be immense work we would have to do if we should show that for each. So we have to select areas where we do the impact cases. And we do that, and we've recently published a paper, or recently got a paper accepted about some of the science that we've done. The easy part is probably what a lot of institutions do. They just count, document presentations, social media, newsletters, press, so on and so forth. That's relatively easy, but then it's really a long way from those numbers to the impact. And we don't really know whether if we send out 15 press releases about asbestos, did it have an effect at all? And what we did then at the NFA was to focus also on the middle section here. Can we somehow see whether our stakeholders access what we do, assess it, adapt it, and apply it? So essentially, can we see whether people use our research? And that was in an attempt to see if we could quantify this. And I'll get back to that because we developed an instrument where we could quantify how our stakeholders, how much they use and apply our knowledge. We do this in an encompassing system. I'll go through it very quickly. We have an innovation documentation system at the NFA where we try to be very systematic about this. First of all, we keep track of all the funding we get and all the resources that we have. Then we have a research information management system called PURE, where we keep track of all the presentations and webinars and things like that. We have, of course, Web of Science to see how we are faring on academic impact. And then we also monitor the social media platforms, how much interaction do we get there. But what we have developed within the last 3 years are some policy impact models. How can we figure out whether we had impact on policy level and how policymakers use our research? And the second thing I was mentioning before, we developed a quantitative instrument, the societal instrument for impact for occupational health and safety, where we want to measure use or usability of knowledge, in the idea that people will not use our knowledge unless they find it useful, and they will not find it useful if they don't know it. So we need these 3 components, and we try to measure those. And finally, as I mentioned before, we also keep track of impact cases. So that is the whole system that we have at NFA. And now I will just dive into this impact instrument that we have developed. We have conducted measures for the last 3 years. We have about 1,500 respondents. That's consultants, it's educators, it's managers and occupational health and safety representatives. And we ask them about the knowledge of what we send out, the usability, can you use this? And we also ask them, do you use this? And in which ways? So we have a whole questionnaire about that. And then we assemble that on the right side here, in the left columns, in the societal impact index, which is then a measure of how well we are faring on creating societal impact. And this is very nice for us because we can see that we have an increase. We have been working very systematically on this. We can tell that to the department that we are fulfilling our task. But maybe more interesting is that we can also look at the different stakeholders and see how are they using our research. And not surprisingly, the consultants and the educators had the highest index score, but quite surprisingly for us was that the labor inspectors had the lowest scorings. And we have then, subsequently, we have started engaging with the labor inspectorate to figure out how can we change that. Is there some more other dialogues they have a need for, some other information from us they need? And you can also see that relatively low are the managers and employees at the workplaces on the scorings. And we were a bit curious about that, so we conducted a subsequent study where we interviewed 36 managers and OSH representatives in private, small and medium-sized enterprises, which I guess everybody knows are some of the hardest ones to get hold of. And then we interviewed those, and we categorized them in different roles and personas. And maybe one of the findings was, and maybe not surprising to you, but one of the findings is that they work on a case-to-case basis. So we might go around and think, well, we are sending out a newsletter, we are sending out information about our research, and then we think, okay, and then the employee representatives will then put that in their mail folder, and then when they encounter a problem, they'll say, oh yeah, NFA, they sent something about this 5 months ago. No, that's not the way they work. They may know some official web pages, but mostly they Google. And when they Google, they do not find us. It was hard to find us. It was difficult, if they found us, it was difficult to navigate our homepage. And if they then found the knowledge they needed, it was difficult to understand. So after we have seen this and realized that they are a different species than the consultants and the educators, we decided to work on optimizing how to find our homepage, revise the web page so that it's more understandable and easier to navigate. And also we have started increasing collaboration with some of the intermediary or the knowledge brokers, the consultants and the educators, especially because we can see there's a big potential in the newly elected work environment representatives. They all get a standard course of 3 days. Can we be more present there? Can we offer some material? Can we get our our institution present in their minds, so that at least they know that if they want to find some good evidence, they should look at our homepage. Another piece of work that we have been doing is trying to, as I mentioned before, we have interviewed some policymakers of how they work on policy processes, and we found a lot of interesting things there. But now we have moved a step forward, and maybe this is work in progress, but we're trying to follow the document track. So we're trying to find all the document policy papers and seeing how are the process moving forward to a decision. This is a decision on a diesel threshold value in Denmark. So how did that come about? It started all back in several years ago, and then gradually more and more build-up was made in policy documents and on EU level. But where was NFA in this? And we needed then to look, and that is the graph on the right, on this side, right side here. NFA wasn't really present so much in the documents, but as soon as you looked into some of the summary reports and some of the meta-analysis, we could see all the small blue dots where the NFA research was contributing. And we could do a similar study if we wanted for PEROSH to see how PEROSH as a common institution are contributing to certain decision processes. So, just to summarize about some of the ways to increase societal impact that we have engaged in at the NFA, international research collaboration such as PEROSH, performance tracking such as the instrument I talked about, stakeholder involvement from idea to implementation, communication and dissemination is very important. We use social media a lot to do that. Collaboration with inspectorates, which I mentioned, special focus on newcomers, and understanding of political processes, actuality and rapid responses. And this actuality and rapid responses was one of the feedbacks we got from the politicians. They would like the answer tomorrow and not in 3 years. And we would say, yes, but you can't get the answer tomorrow. We need time to do the research. But I've recently been to Canada, and they are engaging a lot in rapid reviews and using artificial intelligence to conduct rapid reviews. So maybe we can actually explore that to meet the politicians' needs more in the future than we can do now. Then on the internal lines, we do capacity building courses for our employees at the NFA on societal impact on implementation, and we also put up incentives for doing this. So to start to wrap up, how do we inject research into policy and practice? What can we do as researchers and research institutions? And I would say the key thing is to provide good evidence. But a key thing is also to provide good, understandable evidence that people can find and use. Both decision makers, the intermediaries, and the workplaces. So the whole ecosystem of evidence. And secondly, we should be proactive in making policy and practice aware of the things that we provide. This requires that we focus on impact from the inception of the research questions, the design of the research we do, to the dissemination. We should put an effort into communication. We should create capacity, support and document societal impact. We should address the whole entire system, and we should collaborate internationally to create the strongest possible evidence, e.g. in PEROSH. To conclude, I will return to one of my first figures, the one with Pink Floyd. We should, and this is not about creating evidence on occupational health and safety, we should observe and describe how we create impact So we should be systematic in figuring out what works and what doesn't work when we try to influence policy and practice. We should translate and exchange that with policy and practice, with each other in the networks. And then we should inject that in our own organizations so that we can be better and better and increase our societal impact. That was my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, don't hesitate to contact me here at the conference or on the email. And also, I would just like to emphasize would be very happy to work with you on documenting impact. We have the tools, we have the methods that we have developed. We would like to share these experiences with others. Thank you.